So yesterday, at the beginning of our day, which, while I will admit was not the beginning of anybody else's day, as Saturday morning is an opportunity for us to do absolutely nothing for many hours in the morning, Elizabeth and I went to buy furniture. And we were in a consignment shop, having sat in a number of chairs and on a number of couches. And we found this furniture in the corner, and I sat in it, and I instinctively did what I always do when I'm comfortable. I kicked my shoes off, I sat myself down, I curled my short legs, because my legs never actually touch the floor in most chairs. I curled them up under me, and I just settled right in. Apparently, I settled in so well that the woman running the store came over and said, "That just looks perfect." And I said, it feels perfect. That moment when I just sank into a chair that was supportive enough and yet soft enough, a chair that I knew I could have a conversation with a friend in. I knew that I could read a book in it. There were places to kind of prop my arm and so I could hold the book in one hand. I could have my morning cup of tea in this chair. In that moment, all I really wanted to do was just abide in that place. That word abide feels more than just live in. There's lots of spaces that we can live in. But to abide is to settle into something. It is to have someone settle into and with you. It often feels like that chair that holds you perfectly. The reality is, though, that the disciples, in this moment in time, as Jesus is using all of this beautiful language of abiding and love, probably feel a little bit more like I felt at the end of the day. One of the things that I had said I would absolutely do was get our dryer hooked back up. We have repiped our house. We had to move the dryer. The electrician left a partially drilled hole through the foundation of my house, but he had to stop drilling because he ran into the asbestos shingle on the outside of my house. I had tried to drill an asbestos shingle only to crack it, because that's what you do with asbestos. So yesterday I had committed to finishing this task. Fortunately, I had found some shingles that our previous residents of the house had left in a corner. But 2.5 hours into a task that I thought was going to be about 10 minutes, I was covered, probably in unhealthy asbestos debris. I was also covered in the slime that develops when wood has had something leak on it for years. Thank God we repiped the house, because apparently we needed it in some places. I was coated. My wife told me, "You will simply leave your clothing in front of the washing machine and go directly to the shower. I just cleaned the bathroom." I was tired and irritated and dirty. The disciples in this moment have just come into Jerusalem to the procession of palms, calling attention, perhaps unwelcome attention, to this small group of people that were followers of Jesus who kept getting into trouble, who kept poking the bear of the Roman Empire and religious leaders. And they are gathered in an upper room celebrating, in the Gospel of John, not the Passover, because that's actually the next day. They are gathered together for dinner, and Jesus keeps saying to them, "I am leaving you." This is not good news for them. Jesus is leaving them. They are probably afraid. They are probably not necessarily sitting comfortably in those chairs, sinking in. They are wondering what it is that Jesus is talking about. Jesus has just thrown them for a loop by washing their feet, which is something that rabbis and teachers and masters and leaders do not do. He has washed their feet. He has done everything he can to make them comfortable, to clean them, to celebrate this last meal together. In the Gospel of John, there is no last meal as Eucharist. What there is the washing of the feet. And then he begins to talk with them. He begins to talk with them, saying that he's leaving, but that he is the vine and they are the branches. They have grown from him. The fruit that they bear is rooted in himself as the vine. They are the branches. And then he begins to talk about the passage that we just heard today. Abide in my love as I abide in the love of God the Father. And then he says something shocking. Something that I don't think we talk about enough as Christians. He says, "You are my friends." Do you think of yourself as a friend of God? Do you think of yourself as someone who can sit curled up in a chair and have a conversation with God? So often as Christians, we talk about being followers, servants. We sometimes still use the language of slavery, which is deeply problematic. We rarely talk about friendship. But what Jesus has just done for his friends is be a friend. He has put aside the ways in which he may be entitled to be their teacher, their rabbi, their prophet, their leader, their God, and has said, I am your friend. Washing their feet is an act of friendship. It is an act of welcoming and making somebody welcome in your home. Getting ready to eat a dinner together in comfort and joy. It's a friendship that Jesus says might sometimes demand risk. Because Jesus goes on to demonstrate his friendship with the disciples when they go to pray in the Kidron garden and the soldiers come forward. Jesus steps forward. I have no doubt that the soldiers would have liked to arrest all of these rabble-rousers. But Jesus steps forward and immediately offers himself. He turns himself over, ensuring that his friends, one of whom has just betrayed him and the other of whom is about to deny him, he ensures that they will not be arrested. Sometimes friendship requires stepping out and being at risk for your friends. To make our house a hospitable place means buying comfortable furniture and making sure that all of the things that make a house work. And sometimes that's messy. And the friendship that God calls us to is not only the one that Jesus has modeled for us, but the kind of friendship that we then see in the book of Acts. During this time of the year, this Easter season, we don't read our first reading from the Hebrew Scriptures, which is what we do throughout the rest of the year. Instead, we focus on the book of Acts and the story of the presence of the Spirit. Pentecost is just a few weeks away, friends. But what we get in these stories of Acts is the presence and the promise of the Spirit, who Jesus at this meal says, the Spirit will come on you. I am leaving. Friends, the ascension is just around the corner. We don't celebrate the ascension on a Sunday, but Jesus is about to leave. And the one that Jesus leaves is the Spirit. The Spirit who comes in and through and works with each and every one of us in surprising ways. The same man who denied Jesus 3 times is so filled with the Spirit of God weeks later, perhaps months, years later. Timelines and Acts are a little bit fuzzy. So filled with the Spirit of God that he's willing to go have a meal with a people that are not a part of his community. He goes and eats with Gentiles and is rather horrified when God says, actually, I want you to eat their food, because Jews don't eat the food of Gentiles. It's a point of tension and distinction in a community that has a long list of traditions that have kept them alive and kept them together. And yet the Spirit just doesn't seem to care, because the Spirit falls upon this family of non-Jews. We don't know what religious background they come from, but what we know is they hear the story of a God who abides with them, of a Spirit who fills and is with people, even though Jesus is no longer amongst his friends, but instead has called his friends to be friends, eating with one another, eating with strangers and guests. The Spirit falls upon them, and they are baptized. No prep, no formation, they're just baptized. Sometimes that happens, because the Spirit calls us to be friends in ways that are surprising and unexpected. And it is worth remembering in this story of John that John himself is writing to a community that has been exiled from their home. They've been kicked out of their own synagogues because of their connection to Jesus. And so just as Jesus is telling his disciples at the Last Supper, abide in me, I abide in you, I have no longer called you servants but friends, the writer of the Gospel of John is reminding those who are no longer welcome in their own places, who are forced to be out and about among people that probably make them quite uncomfortable, speaking languages that are not their own and eating foods that are not to their taste, that God is with you, that the vine always produces branches, and that the abiding love of God never ends, and that we are called to be that community of friendship and love that is willing to step up and stand up for one another when necessary, that is willing to eat together foods both beloved and new, that is willing to speak languages our own and not our own. To be a people who are friends. I know that many of you walked into Christ Church and sat down and heard the choir and thought, I'm home. Amen to that, friends. I'm also pretty sure that none of you have stayed here only because of our fabulous music. If you want fabulous music, I suggest you go to the Northwest Repertory Singers today. They will be performing here. Because church asks for more than our willingness to sit and listen to beautiful music, though I am so grateful we get to do that. Church asks us to be friends with one another, to be friends when the chair is comfortable and when the house is messy and leaky and dirty. We are called to be friends with one another. And that is my hope for Christ Church, that the friendships that I already see, that have sustained this place over years of transition and trial, are friendships which deepen and grow and welcome other new people. People with unexpected ways of singing and talking and moving and dancing and eating. That what sustains us is being friends to one another. That is where the Spirit of God is most alive. And each and every one of you are called not servants, not slaves. You are called friends of God. Amen.